The morning Natalie Beaumont's dreams crumbled was the same morning the sun seemed to mock her with its golden brilliance. The bank's debt collector, a wiry man with cold eyes, slapped a foreclosure notice onto her bakery door as the townspeople of Glenrio, New Mexico, watched with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. "You have until sundown to clear out your things, Miss Beaumont," he announced with callous formality, his voice carrying across the dusty main street. "The property now belongs to Glenrio Territorial Bank." Natalie stood frozen, flour still dusting her apron and hands, the scent of fresh bread lingering in the air. At 26, she had poured every cent, every drop of sweat, every fragment of hope into Beaumont's bakery. 3 years of early mornings and late nights, of perfecting recipes passed down from her grandmother, all vanishing before her eyes. "Mr. Harrison, please," she implored, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "I only need another month. The cattle drive is coming through soon, and I'll have enough to— Your father's debts have gone unpaid for too long, Miss Beaumont," Harrison interrupted, adjusting his spectacles with an air of finality. "The bank has been more than generous. I'm just doing my job." Natalie fought back tears as she remembered her father's funeral just 6 months ago. Thomas Beaumont had left behind little except debts and the bakery they had built together after her mother's passing years before. She had been struggling to keep up with the payments while maintaining the business, but a poor harvest had sent flour prices soaring, and fewer travelers had passed through Glenrio in recent months. "At least give me until tomorrow," she pleaded, aware of the growing audience of townsfolk. "I have orders to fulfill today." Harrison checked his pocket watch. "Sundown, Miss Beaumont, not a minute more." As he walked away, Natalie felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. The year was 1882, and in the New Mexico territory, a woman alone had few options. The bakery wasn't just her livelihood, it was her home, her inheritance, her connection to the parents she had lost. Mrs. Potter, the elderly schoolteacher, approached with sympathetic eyes. "Oh, my dear girl, what will you do now?" Natalie straightened her spine, unwilling to collapse under the weight of public scrutiny. "I don't know yet, Mrs. Potter, but I have orders to complete before sundown." She retreated into her bakery, closing the door on the whispers and stares. Inside, the familiar warmth enveloped her, the heat from the brick oven, the sweet aroma of sugar and vanilla, the comforting presence of her mother's rolling pin and her father's handwritten recipes tacked to the wall. With mechanical precision, Natalie completed her orders: 3 birthday cakes, 2 dozen dinner rolls for the hotel restaurant, and cherry pies for the church social. Each item she wrapped felt like saying goodbye to an old friend. When the last customer had collected their order, offering awkward condolences, Natalie began packing her personal possessions. The kitchenware went into wooden crates, the copper mixing bowls, the fine sifter from San Francisco, the cast iron pans that had been her grandmother's wedding gift. She carefully wrapped the porcelain figurines that had decorated the front counter, small dancing ladies in colorful dresses that her father had purchased for her 19th birthday. Last came the recipe book, bound in worn leather and filled with generations of Beaumont family secrets. As the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the floor, Natalie sat amid the boxes and allowed herself, finally, to cry. The tears came in heaving sobs that bent her double, her forehead pressed against the cool surface of the wooden work table where she had kneaded countless loaves of bread. The jingling of the bell above the door startled her from her grief. Hastily wiping her eyes, she looked up to see a tall figure silhouetted against the dying light. "We're closed," she said, her voice rough. "Permanently?" "So I heard," came the reply, a deep baritone with a slight drawl. The man stepped further into the bakery, and features emerged from the shadow, a strong jaw covered in stubble, keen gray eyes under the brim of a worn Stetson, broad shoulders beneath a dusty coat. Natalie recognized him vaguely as one of the ranchers from outside town. She had seen him occasionally at the general store or passing through on horseback, though they had never spoken. "Zachary Palmer," he introduced himself, removing his hat and holding it against his chest. I own the Double P Ranch about 10 miles west of here. Natalie Beaumont, she replied automatically, though she suspected he already knew her name. Everyone in Glenrio knew everyone else's business. As you can see, Mr. Palmer, I'm in the middle of packing. The bank is taking possession at sundown. Zachary's eyes traveled around the bakery, taking in the emptying shelves, the crates of belongings, the small living quarters visible through a doorway at the back. I heard about that too, he said, stepping further into the room. It's why I'm here, actually. Natalie straightened, suddenly conscious of her tear-stained face and disheveled appearance. If you're looking for baked goods, I'm afraid I've sold everything, and I won't be making any more. That's not why I came, Zachary said, placing his hat on the counter and leaning against it with casual grace. I came because I have a proposition for you, Miss Beaumont. Wariness crept into Natalie's expression. She had already received 2 propositions that afternoon, one from the hotel owner offering her a position as a maid, and another from the saloon keeper suggesting she might entertain his customers. Both had been declined with as much dignity as she could muster. What sort of proposition? She asked cautiously. The kind that involves baking, Zachary replied, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. I have a ranch house with a kitchen that hasn't seen proper use since my mother passed 5 years ago. I have cowhands who'd sell their souls for something better than my trail cook's biscuits, which are about as tender as boot leather. And I have customers coming through regularly, cattle buyers, horse traders, neighboring ranchers. Natalie stared at him, uncertain where this was leading. I'm offering you my kitchen, Miss Beaumont, Zachary continued, his gray eyes steady on hers. Bake in my kitchen instead. You can sell to my ranch hands to visitors, and I'll take you into town once a week to deliver orders if you get them. In exchange, you get room and board plus a share of whatever you sell. The offer stunned Natalie into silence. Of all the scenarios she had imagined for her future after losing the bakery, this had never occurred to her. You want me to be your cook, she finally managed. No, Zachary shook his head. I want you to be a baker who uses my kitchen. There's a difference. You'd keep your independence, your recipes, your business just in a different location. My housekeeper, Mrs. Flores, handles the regular cooking. She's getting on in years, though, and her hands trouble her too much for baking. Natalie's mind raced. The arrangement sounded almost too good to be true. Why would you do this? You hardly know me. Zachary picked up his hat, turning it slowly in his hands. Let's just say I appreciate good bread, Miss Beaumont, and I know what it's like to lose something you've worked hard for. His expression grew distant for a moment before he focused on her again. Besides, it seems a waste to let talent like yours disappear because of unfortunate circumstances. The bakery door swung open again, and Harrison, the debt collector, appeared, pocket watch in hand. Time's up, Miss Beaumont. I need the keys now. Natalie felt panic rise in her throat. She had nowhere to go. The boarding house was too expensive, and she had too much pride to throw herself on the mercy of acquaintances. She looked back at Zachary Palmer, studying his face for any sign of deception or ulterior motive. All she saw was a straightforward offer and perhaps a touch of compassion carefully disguised as business sense. You have space for my things, she asked quietly. My wagon's outside, he replied, and there's a guest room at the ranch that's been empty for years. Harrison cleared his throat impatiently. Miss Beaumont, the keys. With a deep breath, Natalie made her decision. I accept your offer, Mr. Palmer. She turned to Harrison and reached into her apron pocket, withdrawing a small brass key. Here, I hope the bank chokes on it. Harrison's face flushed red at her words, but he took the key without comment and marched out. Well, Zachary said with a slight smile, I should warn you that the Double P is no fancy establishment. The house is solid but simple, and ranch life starts before dawn. I'm a baker, Mr. Palmer, Natalie replied, straightening her shoulders. I know about early mornings. For the next hour, Zachary helped load her possessions onto his wagon. The ranch hands he'd brought with him, a young man named Billy and an older Mexican cowboy called Manuel, worked efficiently, treating her kitchenware with surprising care. When the last box was secured under a tarpaulin, Natalie stood in the empty bakery one final time. The space already felt different, hollowed out, abandoned. She touched the worn wooden counter where she had served customers since she was tall enough to see over it. So many memories lived in these walls. Her father teaching her to knead dough, her mother's laughter as they decorated Christmas cookies, the pride on both their faces when she sold her first cake at 14. "We should go," Zachary said gently from the doorway. "It'll be dark soon and the road gets tricky." Natalie nodded, unable to speak. She followed him outside, not looking back as he helped her onto the wagon seat. The townsfolk watched from windows and sidewalks as the procession moved down Glenrio's main street, the proud baker's daughter leaving town with a rancher she barely knew, her life's possessions piled in his wagon. As the town receded behind them, Natalie finally found her voice. "Thank you," she said simply. Zachary kept his eyes on the road ahead, his hands steady on the reins. "Don't thank me yet, Miss Beaumont. Ranch life isn't easy and you might find you've traded one set of troubles for another." "Perhaps," she agreed, watching the landscape change as they headed west into the setting sun. "But at least I can still bake, that's something." The Double P Ranch materialized from the darkness like a ship emerging from fog. Natalie had dozed against the hard wagon seat, exhaustion finally overtaking her after the emotional turmoil of the day. She awakened to Zachary's gentle nudge and the sight of a substantial two-story house, windows glowing with lamplight against the night sky. Beyond the main house stood a barn, bunkhouse, corrals, and various outbuildings, all arranged with practical efficiency. It wasn't as grand as some of the cattle barren spreads she'd heard about, but it was impressive nonetheless, especially for a man who appeared to be in his early 30s. "Home," Zachary announced simply, bringing the wagon to a halt before the front porch. "Mrs. Flores will have kept supper warm." As if summoned by his words, the front door opened, and a short, plump woman with silver-streaked black hair stepped out, wiping her hands on her apron. She spoke rapidly in Spanish, her tone scolding though her eyes were kind. "Yes, we're later than planned," Zachary replied in English, helping Natalie down from the wagon. "Mrs. Flores, this is Miss Beaumont. She'll be staying with us and using the kitchen for her baking business." The housekeeper scrutinized Natalie with keen dark eyes before her face softened into a warm smile. "Welcome, señorita. You must be hungry after such a journey. Come inside while the men unload your things." Too tired to protest, Natalie allowed herself to be ushered into the house. The interior surprised her. It was comfortable rather than ostentatious, with solid furniture, clean floors, and touches that spoke of a woman's influence despite Zachary's bachelor status. Landscape paintings hung on the walls, bookshelves lined one side of the sitting room, and a piano stood in the corner, though it looked rarely used. Mrs. Flores led her to a dining room where the table was set for two. Sit, I will bring food." Minutes later, Natalie found herself facing a plate of tender beef, beans, and fresh tortillas. Zachary joined her after giving instructions to his men, removing his coat and hat and washing his hands in a basin near the door before taking his seat. "Mrs. Flores makes the best beef in the territory," he said, breaking the slightly awkward silence. "Her secret is a marinade she refuses to share, even with me." Natalie took a bite and had to agree the meat was flavorful and delicate. "It's wonderful," she said, realizing suddenly how hungry she was. They ate in companionable silence for several minutes before she gathered the courage to ask the question foremost in her mind. "Mr. Palmer, I'm grateful for your offer, but I still don't understand why you made it. Surely there are easier ways to get baked goods than installing a baker in your home." Zachary set down his fork and regarded her thoughtfully. "Miss Beaumont, do you know much about the cattle business?" She shook her head, puzzled by the change in subject. "It's built on reputation and relationships," he explained. "When buyers come through, they need to be impressed not just by the stock but by the operation as a whole. My father understood that, and he built this ranch from nothing because people trusted him and wanted to do business with him." He paused, taking a sip of water. "When he died, I inherited not just land and cattle but those relationships. I've worked hard to maintain them, but the truth is, this place lacks a certain hospitality since my mother passed. The best business often happens over good food in a welcoming environment, understanding dawned on Natalie. So I'm to help you impress cattle buyers with apple pie, the corner of Zachary's mouth lifted in a half smile. Something like that, though it's not just about business. The men work hard and good food improves morale, and selfishly, I miss having decent bread. Mrs. Flores appeared with coffee and slices of dried apple cake that made Natalie's professional eye note its slightly overworked texture. "And what do you know about me, Mr. Palmer?" Natalie asked after the housekeeper had retreated. "How do you know I'm not a terrible baker who simply had a good location in town?" This drew a genuine laugh from Zachary, transforming his serious face into something startlingly handsome. "Miss Beaumont, I've eaten your sourdough bread. I've tasted your cinnamon rolls, and I heard what people said when they left your shop, always satisfied, always coming back for more. That doesn't happen with mediocre baking." Heat rose to Natalie's cheeks at the compliment. "Well, I hope I won't disappoint." "I doubt you will," he said, rising from the table. "Now, let me show you to your room. You must be exhausted, and tomorrow we'll be busy getting you settled." He led her upstairs to a bedroom at the end of the hallway, carrying the small valise containing her nightclothes and personal items. The room was simple but comfortable, with a double bed covered in a colorful quilt, a washstand with a pitcher and basin, a small writing desk, and a wardrobe. "The rest of your things will be brought up tomorrow," Zachary said, setting down her bag. "Bathrooms down the hall. We have indoor plumbing, which my father considered his greatest achievement. Mrs. Flores sleeps in a room off the kitchen. I'm at the other end of this hallway if you need anything." Natalie nodded, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of her situation. Just that morning, she had awakened in her own home above her own bakery. Now she stood in a stranger's house, dependent on his charity no matter how he dressed it up as a business arrangement. Zachary seemed to read her thoughts. "Miss Beaumont, I want to be clear about something. This is a business proposition, not charity. I expect your baking to add value to my ranch, and I'll compensate you fairly for it. You're not beholden to me for anything beyond our agreement." His directness was reassuring. "Thank you, Mr. Palmer. I intend to make this arrangement worthwhile for both of us." "Good." He moved toward the door. "One more thing, formality seems ridiculous under the circumstances. Please call me Zach. Everyone does, except Mrs. Flores, who insists on Senor Palmer no matter how many times I tell her otherwise." Natalie smiled despite her exhaustion. "Then I'm Natalie, not Miss Beaumont." "Very well, Natalie, get some rest. Morning comes early on a ranch." After he left, Natalie sat on the edge of the bed, trying to process the whirlwind changes in her life. Outside the window, she could hear the night sounds of the ranch, distant lowing of cattle, the occasional whicker of horses, the soft hooting of an owl. So different from town, where even at night there was the murmur of the saloon or late travelers at the hotel. She unpacked her nightgown and toiletries, performed her evening ablutions, and slipped between cool sheets that smelled of sunshine and lavender. Despite her racing thoughts, exhaustion claimed her almost instantly, pulling her into dreamless sleep. Dawn arrived with a cacophony of ranch sounds: roosters crowing, men calling to each other, horses stamping, and the clatter of breakfast preparations downstairs. Natalie dressed quickly in a simple blue cotton dress, pinned her chestnut hair into a practical knot, and made her way to the kitchen. Mrs. Flores was already hard at work, frying bacon and mixing biscuit dough. She looked up as Natalie entered, a quick smile lighting her weathered face. "Buenos dias, señorita. Did you sleep well?" "Very well, thank you," Natalie replied, instinctively rolling up her sleeves. "May I help?" The housekeeper hesitated only briefly before nodding toward the biscuit dough. "Perhaps you can show me how to make these lighter. The men complain, but my hands." She held up gnarled fingers, bent with arthritis. Natalie stepped forward, examining the dough. "The secret is to handle it as little as possible." "May I?" For the next half hour, the two women worked side by side, with Natalie demonstrating her technique for biscuits, while Mrs. Flores taught her the rhythm of the ranch kitchen. By the time Zachary entered freshly shaven, His dark hair still damp, they had produced a breakfast that made his eyebrows rise in appreciation. "I see you two have found common ground," he observed, pouring himself coffee from the pot kept warm on the stove. "Natalie has good hands for dough, Mrs. Flores declared. "Better than mine now. I'm just happy to be in a kitchen again," Natalie admitted. "Where do the men eat?" "The cowhands take meals in the bunkhouse most days," Zachary explained. "Foreman and a couple of the senior men sometimes eat here. Today it's just us and Lewis, my foreman." As if on cue, the back door opened and a lean, weathered man in his 40s entered, removing his hat as he stepped inside. "Morning, boss." "Madam," he nodded to Mrs. Flores before his eyes settled curiously on Natalie. "Lewis, this is Natalie Beaumont," Zachary introduced her. "She'll be using our kitchen to continue her baking business." "The lady from the bakery in town," Lewis's face brightened. "Those cinnamon rolls you make there worth riding 20 miles for." Natalie smiled, pleased by the recognition. "Thank you, I hope to be making them again soon." "You're in for a treat then, Lewis," Zachary said, gesturing them all toward the dining room. "Let's eat before it gets cold." Over breakfast, they discussed the day's arrangements. Zachary would show Natalie the ranch after the meal, then help her organize the kitchen space to accommodate her baking alongside Mrs. Flores's cooking. Lewis reported on ranch operations. A fence needed repair in the south pasture, 2 mares were close to foaling, and a cattle buyer from Kansas was expected the following week. "Johnson's a good buyer but particular," Zachary told Natalie. "He likes to be impressed and he has a sweet tooth. If you could have something special ready when he visits." "I could make my blackberry tarts," Natalie suggested. "If you have blackberries, that is." "There's a patch down by the creek," Mrs. Flores said. "I make preserves, but there are plenty." The casual inclusion in ranch business made Natalie feel less like an interloper and more like a valued contributor. After breakfast, true to his word, Zachary gave her a tour of the Double P. The ranch sprawled across several thousand acres of varied terrain, grasslands for grazing, hills that provided shelter from winter winds, and a creek that ensured water even in dry seasons. The main house stood at the center of the operational buildings, with corrals, barns, a smithy, and storage structures arranged nearby. Beyond these lay the bunkhouse, where most of the 20 or so ranch hands lived. "My grandfather started with 50 acres and 10 cows, Zachary explained as they walked. "My father expanded it to what you see now. I've added the western section since taking over 6 years ago." "It's impressive," Natalie said sincerely. "You must be very proud." "It's not mine, not really," he replied, surprising her. At her questioning look, he clarified, "The land is just on loan to each generation. Our job is to improve it for the next. At least, that's how my father saw it." They continued toward a fenced pasture where sleek horses grazed. Zachary leaned against the fence and a chestnut mare lifted her head, trotting over to nuzzle his palm. "This is Penny," he said, stroking the horse's forehead. "She was my first personal purchase when I was 17. She's getting old for ranch work now, but I keep her as a reminder of where I started." Natalie reached out tentatively to touch the horse's velvety nose. "She's beautiful, she's spoiled," Zachary corrected with obvious affection, "but she earned it." He turned to face Natalie directly. "Speaking of earning things, I meant what I said about this being a business arrangement. We should discuss terms." They settled on an agreement that seemed fair to both. Natalie would have full use of the kitchen for her baking when Mrs. Flores wasn't preparing meals. She would provide daily bread and basic desserts for the main house, plus weekly treats for the ranch hands. Any special orders from town or custom baking for visitors would be her own business, with 20% going to the ranch to cover ingredients and transportation costs. "I'll take you into town every Saturday," Zachary added. "You can deliver orders and take new ones, and you can visit friends, of course." Natalie thought of the townsfolk who had watched her departure without offering help. "Thank you, but I'm not sure I have many friends to visit." Something like understanding passed across Zachary's face. Small towns can be hard that way. People have long memories and short courage. They walked back to the house in comfortable silence. The rest of the day passed in a flurry of activity as Natalie's belongings were brought in and her baking equipment found homes in the spacious kitchen. Mrs. Flores seemed genuinely pleased to share her domain, particularly when Natalie explained her mother had been Mexican and had taught her both English and Spanish recipes. "My mama made the best pan dulce in Chihuahua," Natalie said as they arranged her baking tins. "She used orange blossom water that my father would buy specially from traders. My mother made conchas that would make angels weep," Mrs. Flores replied, a bond forming between them through shared culinary heritage. By evening, Natalie felt cautiously optimistic about her new situation. The kitchen was well stocked and now organized to her liking. Her room upstairs had been transformed with her personal touches, the dancing lady figurines arranged on the dresser, her mother's shawl draped over a chair, her books stacked on the bedside table. At supper, Zachary informed her that word of her arrival had already spread among the ranch hands. "Billy rode to the north pasture today and told the men there they're already placing bets on who gets the first pie." "Then I shouldn't disappoint them," Natalie decided. "I'll start with bread tomorrow, but perhaps pies the day after." After the meal, Zachary excused himself to review ranch accounts, and Mrs. Flores retired to her room, leaving Natalie alone with her thoughts. She wandered onto the front porch, drawn by the vast night sky with its blanket of stars. The air was cooler than in town, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. She was so absorbed in the night that she didn't hear Zachary approach until he spoke. "Different view from town, isn't it?" she startled slightly. "Yes, I've never seen so many stars." "One advantage of being away from even the modest lights of Glenrio," he said, leaning against a porch column. "My mother used to say that's why ranchers tend to be philosophical. Too much time staring at stars makes a person ponder their place in the universe." Was she a rancher's daughter? Natalie asked, curious about the woman whose kitchen she now occupied. "No," Zachary replied, his voice softening with memory. "She was a school teacher from Boston who came west for adventure and found my father instead. She never quite adapted to ranch life, but she loved my father enough to make it work." He paused, then added, "The piano was hers. She tried to bring culture to the frontier, as she put it." "Do you play?" Natalie asked. "Badly," he admitted with a self-deprecating smile. "She insisted I learn, but I was more interested in horses than handle." "Do you?" "A little. My mother taught me some simple songs." Zachary seemed about to say something more, but checked his pocket watch instead. "It's getting late, and morning comes early on a ranch," Natalie finished for him with a smile. "So you've mentioned." As they went inside, Natalie realized she felt more at peace than she had in months, perhaps even since before her father's illness. The loss of her bakery still ached like a fresh wound, but somehow the vast landscape and straight-talking rancher had put her troubles in perspective. Tonight, at least, she would sleep without worry about tomorrow's bank payments or dwindling flour supplies. The morning found Natalie in the kitchen before sunrise, familiarizing herself with the wood-burning stove that was larger but otherwise similar to her own. Mrs. Flores appeared as she was mixing dough for the day's bread, nodding approval at Natalie's early start. "The men will be happy," she said, moving to prepare breakfast. "They miss good bread." By the time Zachary arrived for breakfast, the kitchen was filled with the yeasty aroma of rising dough. He inhaled appreciatively. "I'd forgotten what that smell does to a man's appetite." "Just wait until it's baking," Natalie promised. The next few days established a rhythm that suited them all. Natalie baked bread daily, varying the type: crusty sourdough, hearty whole wheat, soft white rolls. She added pies as promised, using the blackberries Mrs. Flores had shown her and apples from the small orchard behind the house. Word of her presence spread quickly, and by the third day, a neighboring rancher's wife rode over specifically to order a cake for her husband's birthday. "I heard you were here from Lewis's wife," the woman, Martha Donovan, explained as Natalie noted the order details. "Everyone in the county knows about your cakes, Miss Beaumont. Please call me Natalie," she replied, pleased by the recognition. "And I'd be happy to make Mr. Donovan's cake." Would Saturday work? I believe Mr. Palmer is taking me into town that day. That would be perfect, Martha said, then added with a hint of mischief, so you and Zachary Palmer, HM, that's caused quite a stir. Natalie felt heat rise to her cheeks. It's not what people might think. It's purely a business arrangement. Martha looked skeptical but didn't press. Well, business or not, it's good to see someone at the Double P again. That ranch needs a woman's touch has for years. After Martha left, Natalie found herself dwelling on the woman's implication. Had she inadvertently damaged her reputation by accepting Zachary's offer? The thought troubled her as she prepared dinner rolls for the evening meal. Mrs. Flores, observant as always, noticed her distraction. Something bothers you, Nina? Natalie hesitated before confiding her concern. Mrs. Donovan seemed to think there was more to my arrangement with Mr. Palmer than business. I wonder if others believe the same. The older woman chuckled as she chopped vegetables for stew. People always think such things, but Senor Palmer is respected. His name beside yours is protection, not scandal. I've worked so hard to be taken seriously as a businesswoman, Natalie sighed. I'd hate to be seen as something else. Then show them you are a businesswoman still, Mrs. Flores advised simply. Actions speak louder than gossip. Saturday arrived with clear skies and mild temperatures. Natalie rose early to prepare the Donovan cake and several orders she'd received through ranch hands and visitors during the week. By the time Zachary knocked on her bedroom door to announce their departure for town, she had everything packed carefully in boxes. Quite a load, he commented, helping her carry them to the wagon. Word travels fast. I hope you don't mind, Natalie said as they settled onto the wagon seat. It seems I've turned your kitchen into a commercial bakery already. That was the idea, Zachary reminded her with a smile. Besides, Mrs. Flores says your help with meals has made her life easier. Her hands pain her less now that you're handling the bread and pastry. The ride to Glenrio took just over an hour, and Natalie found herself growing tense as the town came into view. She hadn't returned since the day she'd left, and the prospect of facing the townspeople stirred complex emotions. Zachary seemed to sense her unease. We'll make our deliveries first, he suggested. Then I have business at the bank and general store. You're welcome to join me or make your own calls. Their arrival did not go unnoticed. As they made their way down the main street, faces appeared in windows and pedestrians paused to watch. Natalie held her head high, focusing on the task at hand rather than the curious stares. Their first stop was the hotel restaurant, where the manager greeted Natalie warmly. Miss Beaumont, your rolls are a sight for sore eyes. Our guests have been complaining about store-bought bread. I'm happy to supply you again, she replied, arranging the delivery on his counter. Would a weekly order work for your needs? As they continued their rounds, Natalie was surprised by the enthusiastic reception. Far from the abandonment she'd felt on her departure, she encountered genuine delight at her return, albeit in a different capacity. By the time they reached the general store, her confidence had rebounded considerably. I'll need about an hour at the bank, Zachary told her after they'd unloaded her last delivery. Meet back here? Actually, I might visit my old bakery, Natalie decided suddenly. I'm curious to see what's become of it. Zachary studied her face. Are you sure that's wise? Probably not, she admitted. But I think I need to. He nodded, understanding. I'll find you there when I'm done. The walk to her former bakery was both shorter and longer than she remembered, the physical distance brief, the emotional journey considerable. As she approached, she saw that the windows had been cleaned and a new sign hung above the door. Glenrio Bakery and Confectionery. Steeling herself, Natalie pushed open the door. The interior had been repainted and the counter repositioned, but the brick oven she and her father had built still dominated the back wall. Behind that counter stood a young woman Natalie didn't recognize, serving a customer. When the customer left, Natalie approached. Good morning. The woman, who appeared to be in her early 20s, smiled uncertainly. Good morning, madam. What can I get you? Nothing, thank you. This used to be my bakery. Recognition dawned on the woman's face. You're Miss Beaumont. My husband and I heard about the foreclosure after we arrived from Denver. Mr. Harrison from the bank offered us very favorable terms to open quickly. I'm sure he did, Natalie said, unable to keep a hint of bitterness from her voice. Business seems good. It's been steady, the woman replied, then hesitated before adding, though people often compare our bread to yours. Not favorably, I'm afraid. Despite herself, Natalie felt a small flicker of satisfaction. Sourdough is tricky, it takes practice, I can imagine. The woman twisted her hands anxiously. I hope our being here doesn't. That is, I'd feel terrible if… Please don't worry, Natalie interrupted, finding she meant it. The bank would have found someone if not you, better a baker than another saloon. She glanced around once more, memories washing over her. I wish you success. As she turned to leave, the woman called after her, Miss Beaumont, I heard you're baking at the Double P now. If you ever wanted to share tips, I'd be grateful. My name's Emma Wright. The unexpected olive branch touched Natalie. Thank you, Mrs. Wright. Perhaps someday… Outside, she took a deep breath, surprised to find the pain of seeing her old bakery in new hands was duller than anticipated. As she stood contemplating this, a familiar, unwelcome voice interrupted her thoughts. Miss Beaumont, I heard rumors you'd returned to town. She turned to face Harrison, the bank's debt collector, his thin face as unwelcoming as ever. Just delivering orders, Mr. Harrison. It seems people still prefer my baking, his lips thinned. Yes, well, business arrangements change. Speaking of which, I understand you found accommodation with Zachary Palmer. The insinuation in his tone made her blood boil. Mr. Palmer has been kind enough to provide space for my business while I rebuild after your bank's actions. Kind indeed, Harrison said with a smirk, though most would call it something else when a single woman lives under a bachelor's roof. Natalie's retort died on her lips as a shadow fell across them both. Most would call it none of their business, Harrison. Zachary's voice came from behind her, cool and controlled but with an edge of steel beneath. Unless they're looking for trouble. Harrison's face paled slightly, but he maintained his superior expression. The bank merely has an interest in the financial stability of local businesses, Palmer. Miss Beaumont's arrangements affect potential creditors. Miss Beaumont has no outstanding debts to your institution, Zachary replied, moving to stand beside Natalie. And her business arrangements are with me now. I suggest you focus on your new tenant's success instead. The standoff lasted only seconds before Harrison retreated with a stiff nod. Good day to you both. When he was out of earshot, Natalie let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Thank you, but I could have handled him. I know, Zachary said, surprising her, but why should you have to? Men like Harrison only understand one thing: someone bigger standing in their way. His defense warmed her, even as she wondered if Mrs. Donovan's assumptions might have some basis after all. In the week they'd lived under the same roof, Zachary had been unfailingly respectful, maintaining a careful distance that preserved proprieties. But there had been moments shared laughter over breakfast, a lingering glance across the dinner table, the way he listened intently when she spoke that suggested something might be growing between them. Are you ready to return to the ranch? He asked, interrupting her thoughts. One more stop, if you don't mind, she replied. The cemetery. I'd like to visit my parents. Zachary's expression softened. Of course, take your time. I'll finish loading the supplies I purchased. The town cemetery lay on a gentle hill overlooking Glenrio. Natalie made her way to the modest plot where her parents rested side by side. Her mother had died when Natalie was 16, leaving her father heartbroken but determined to raise his daughter well. For 10 years, they had run the bakery together until his heart had failed him one winter morning. Kneeling beside the graves, Natalie cleared away fallen leaves and placed the small bunch of wildflowers she had gathered on the ranch. I'm sorry I lost the bakery, she said softly. But I think you'd approve of this new path, Papa. Mr. Palmer is. He's a good man, I believe. And I'm still baking, still using your recipes and Mama's techniques. A gentle breeze stirred the flowers, and Natalie felt a sense of peace settle over her. Whatever happened next, she was finding her way forward. That would have made her parents proud. When she returned to the wagon, Zachary was waiting patiently, the supplies loaded and secured. "Ready? Yes," she said with quiet certainty. "I'm ready." The journey back to the Double P was companionable, with Natalie recounting her visit to the bakery and Zachary sharing news he'd gathered in town. The cattle buyer from Kansas was indeed arriving Monday, along with two other potential buyers who'd heard about the Double P-Ticket's improved stock. "It seems your reputation extends beyond baking," Natalie observed. Zachary shrugged modestly. "My father established the foundation. I'm just building on it." "You do yourself too little credit," she countered. "From what I've seen and heard, you've expanded the ranch considerably." "Land is only valuable if it's used well," he replied. "My father taught me that. He also taught me that a man's word is his bond, and that how you treat people matters more than how many acres you own." As the ranch came into view, Natalie realized that she had come to think of it as home in just a week's time. The thought both comforted and unsettled her. How quickly she had adapted to this new life, this new place, this new family of sorts. The days leading up to the cattle buyer's visit were busy ones. Natalie prepared special breads and desserts, while Mrs. Flores planned elaborate meals showcasing the best of her Mexican cuisine. Zachary and the ranch hands ensured that the property was immaculate, the cattle in prime condition, and the ledgers up to date. By Monday morning, everything was ready. Natalie had risen before dawn to bake fresh bread and prepare blackberry tarts that would be served warm after dinner. She was just removing the last batch from the oven when Zachary appeared in the kitchen doorway, dressed in his finest clothes, a crisp white shirt, black vest, and dark trousers that emphasized his tall, lean frame. "You look very professional," she commented, setting the tarts to cool. "And you have flour on your nose," he replied with a smile, stepping forward to brush it away with his thumb. The casual touch sent an unexpected shiver through Natalie. Zachary seemed to feel it too, his hand lingering a moment too long before he stepped back. "The buyers should arrive by noon," he said, clearing his throat. "I'll show them the herds first, then bring them to the house for late dinner. Mrs. Flores says everything's on schedule." "Absolutely," Natalie assured him. "Your guests will leave with full bellies and sweet memories." His eyes held hers for a moment. "Thank you, Natalie. Your being here, it's made a difference." Before she could respond, he was gone, striding toward the stables where Lewis had horses saddled and waiting. Natalie watched him go, a curious warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the kitchen's heat. The cattle buyers arrived precisely at noon. Mr. Johnson from Kansas, a corpulent man with shrewd eyes and a booming laugh. Mr. Eaton from Chicago, thin and serious with calculating glances. And Mr. Reeves from St. Louis, younger than the others with an easy charm. Zachary greeted them warmly before leading them out to inspect the herds. While they were gone, Natalie and Mrs. Flores put final touches on the meal. The dining room table gleamed with the ranch's best china and silver, rarely used since Zachary's mother had passed. Fresh flowers from the garden adorned the center, and delicious aromas wafted from the kitchen. When the men returned late afternoon, their voices carried jovial and relaxed, a good sign for business. Natalie remained in the kitchen as Mrs. Flores showed them to the sitting room for drinks before dinner, but she could hear their appreciation for the comfortable surroundings. "Palmer, you've been holding out on us," Johnson's booming voice carried. "Last time I was here, we ate beef jerky in the bunkhouse. Now look at this spread." "Times change, gentlemen," came Zachary's smooth reply. "The Double P believes in hospitality as well as quality stock." Dinner was served at 5, a traditional Mexican feast of tender beef, spicy beans, fresh tortillas, and roasted vegetables, with Natalie's crusty bread on the side. She joined them at the table at Zachary's insistence, feeling somewhat self-conscious in her best dress, a deep green that complemented her eyes, according to Mrs. Flores. The conversation flowed easily, with talk of cattle prices giving way to stories of trail drives and eventually more personal matters. Mr. Johnson, on his third glass of whiskey, turned his attention to Natalie. "So, Miss Beaumont, Palmer tells me you're the genius behind that sourdough." Best I've had since San Francisco. You're very kind, Mr. Johnson, she replied. Baking is my passion, and her profession, Zachary added firmly. Natalie owned the bakery in Glenrio before joining us at the Double P. Reeves raised an eyebrow. Owned it yourself. That's unusual for a young lady. My father left it to me, Natalie explained. We built it together after my mother passed. And now you've brought your talents here, Eaton observed. Lucky for Palmer. Lucky for us all, Johnson declared. A man gets tired of trail cooking and rough living. This, he gestured at the table, this reminds us what we're working for. Home, comfort, good food shared with good company. When Mrs. Flores brought in the blackberry tarts, still warm with vanilla cream on the side, the men's enthusiasm reached new heights. Business talk resumed over dessert, with prices and quantities discussed in between appreciative mouthfuls. I'll take 200 head at your price, Palmer, Johnson announced finally, setting down his fork. And I'd consider more if delivery could be arranged to the railhead at Santa Fe. I can commit to that, Zachary replied smoothly. Lewis can lead the drive next month. By the time the evening concluded, all 3 buyers had placed substantial orders with promises of future business. Zachary walked them to the guest quarters, a separate small house kept for visitors, his expression satisfied but controlled. When he returned to the main house, he found Natalie and Mrs. Flores clearing the dining room. Leave that, he said, his voice warm with success. You've both worked hard enough today. The dinner was a triumph, Natalie said, setting down the plates she'd gathered. I think Mr. Johnson proposed marriage to Mrs. Flores after tasting her beef, and he offered to take you back to Kansas after those tarts, Zachary countered with a smile. I had to remind him I had a prior claim on your baking skills. Mrs. Flores, observing the exchange with knowing eyes, excused herself. I will finish in the morning, Buenas noches. When she had gone, Zachary moved to the sideboard and poured 2 small glasses of whiskey. A celebration, he explained, offering one to Natalie. Those contracts will see the ranch secure for another year. Then I'm glad, she said, accepting the glass though she rarely drank spirits. Your hospitality strategy seems to have worked. Our strategy, he corrected, raising his glass. To successful partnerships. As they sipped the fiery liquid, Natalie felt a pleasant warmth that owed as much to Zachary's presence as to the alcohol. In the flickering light of the oil lamps, his features seemed softer, his usually guarded expression more open. I should thank you properly, he said after a moment. Your contribution today went beyond baking. The way you engaged with the buyers made them feel welcome. It made a difference. I'm glad I could help, she replied simply. It feels good to be useful again, to have purpose. Is that what you missed most about your bakery, the purpose? Natalie considered the question. Partly, but also the connection to my family, to my history. The bakery was more than a business, it was my heritage, my parents' legacy. Zachary nodded, understanding. The ranch is like that for me. Every fence post, every branded calf, every acre represents my family's work. Losing it would be like losing part of myself. The shared understanding created a bridge between them, and Natalie realized how similar they were despite their different circumstances, both carrying on family traditions, both feeling the weight of legacy and responsibility. Well, she said finally, setting down her empty glass, we should both rest. Morning comes early on a ranch, he finished with her, smiling. I do say that often, don't I? Only every day, she teased, moving toward the stairs. He followed, extinguishing lamps as they went. At the foot of the staircase, they paused, suddenly aware of the intimacy of the moment, the quiet house, the shared success, the deepening connection between them. Natalie, Zachary began, his voice lower than usual. I want you to know that whatever arrangement brought you here, I'm grateful for your presence, not just for the ranch or the business, but... He hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. I know, she said softly, saving him from having to articulate feelings that were still forming for both of them. Good night, Zach. Good night, he replied, watching as she ascended the stairs, carrying with her the possibility of something neither had anticipated when she first arrived at the Double P. The success of the cattle sale marked a turning point for the ranch and for Natalie's place within it. Word spread quickly about the revival of hospitality at the Double P, bringing more visitors, neighboring ranchers, traders passing through, even the occasional traveler seeking shelter. Each departure seemed to leave behind orders for Natalie's baked goods, and soon she found herself with a thriving business again, operating from Zachary's kitchen instead of her own. As summer progressed into early autumn, life on the ranch settled into a comfortable routine. Natalie baked daily, assisted Mrs. Flores with meals, and twice weekly rode with Zachary or Lewis into town to deliver orders. Her bedroom gradually accumulated personal touches, curtains she had sewn from fabric purchased in town, a small bookshelf Zachary had built when he noticed her books stacked on the floor, wildflowers in a jar that she refreshed regularly. The relationship between Natalie and Zachary evolved gradually, almost imperceptibly. Small gestures accumulated, his hand at her elbow as they walked, her coffee waiting for him when he returned from early morning rides, shared glances across the dinner table that communicated without words. They began spending evenings together on the porch, watching stars emerge while discussing the day's events or sharing stories from their pasts. It was on one such evening, as September's cooler air hinted at the coming autumn, that their cautious dance toward each other accelerated. They sat side by side on the porch swing, Natalie wrapped in a light shawl against the evening chill. "I had a letter from Emmer right today," she mentioned, referring to the woman who now ran the bakery in Glenrio. They had struck up a cautious friendship during Natalie's trips to town, with Emma often seeking advice on difficult recipes. "Oh," Zachary replied, his arm resting comfortably along the back of the swing. "What news from town?" "The bank is raising her rent," Natalie said, unable to keep the edge from her voice. "Harrison claims increased property values require adjustment." Zachary's jaw tightened. "That man has the heart of a rattlesnake. Is she going to manage?" "She thinks so." "Her husband has taken additional work at the livery stable." Natalie paused, then added, "It makes me realize how fortunate I am, despite losing the bakery. Your offer came at exactly the right moment." "Providence, perhaps," Zachary suggested, "or just good business sense on my part." Natalie turned to study his profile in the fading light. Was it only business, Zach? Even then, the direct question seemed to catch him off guard. He met her gaze, hesitation warring with honesty in his expression. "Not entirely," he admitted finally. "I'd admired you from afar for some time, your determination, your independence. When I heard about the foreclosure, it seemed like an opportunity to help someone I respected while also benefiting the ranch. And now," she pressed gently. Zachary's hand moved from the back of the swing to rest lightly on her shoulder. "Now I can't imagine the Double P without you, or rather, I can't imagine my life without you in it." The simple declaration hung between them, honest and unadorned. Natalie felt something shift inside her, as if pieces of her heart were finally settling into their proper places. "I feel the same," she whispered. His hand moved to cup her cheek, and she leaned into the touch, eyes closing briefly at the warmth of his palm against her skin. When she opened them again, he had moved closer, his face just inches from hers. "Natalie," he murmured, "may I kiss you?" Her answer was to close the remaining distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that began tentatively but quickly deepened as months of growing affection found physical expression. His arms encircled her, drawing her closer, and she felt herself responding with an intensity that both surprised and delighted her. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Zachary rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that for a very long time. Why didn't you?" she asked, her hands still resting against his chest, feeling his heart race beneath her palms. "I didn't want you to think it was expected," he replied seriously. "That your place here depended on anything beyond our business arrangement. I wanted you to feel secure, independent." His consideration touched her deeply. "Thank you for that, but I haven't felt like just a business partner for quite some time now," he smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with gentle fingers. "No, what have you felt like then?" Like someone coming home after a long journey, she replied honestly. Like this is where I'm meant to be. The weeks that followed brought a deepening of their relationship, conducted with the proper restraint their circumstances required, but with a new openness about their feelings. They were careful to maintain appearances. Mrs. Flores provided adequate chaperonage within the house, and their behavior in public remained above reproach. But privately, they began planning a shared future. "I've been thinking," Zachary said one evening as they walked along the creek that ran through the ranch property, the October sun setting early behind the distant mountains. The old storehouse near the main road could be converted. Converted into what? Natalie asked, her hand comfortably entwined with his. "A proper bakery," he replied. "With a shop front for customers and a large kitchen, you could expand your business without having to share space with Mrs. Flores, and customers could come directly to you rather than waiting for deliveries in town." The thoughtfulness of the suggestion moved her. "You do that, build me a new bakery." "I'd do a lot more than that for you, Natalie," he said, stopping their walk to face her directly. "If you'd let me." There was a weight to his words that made her heart quicken. "What exactly are you suggesting, Zachary Palmer?" Instead of answering immediately, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object that caught the last rays of sunlight. A ring, a simple gold band set with a modest diamond flanked by two smaller sapphires. "It was my mother's," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "My father gave it to her when he was just starting the ranch, before they had much money. He always promised to buy her a grander one when they prospered, but she never wanted to replace it." Natalie felt tears gathering in her eyes as understanding dawned. "Zach, I know it's been only a few months," he continued, words coming faster now as if he feared losing courage. "But I've never been more certain of anything. I love you, Natalie, your strength, your kindness, your determination. The way you've made this ranch a home again, the way you've made my life fuller than I ever thought possible." He took her hand, his own slightly trembling. "I'm asking if you would do me the honor of becoming my wife, of building a life here together, not as my baker or business partner, but as my equal, my companion, the keeper of my heart." Tears spilled onto Natalie's cheeks as emotion overwhelmed her. "Yes," she whispered, then more firmly, "Yes, Zachary, I would be honored to be your wife." His face broke into a radiant smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her hand. He gathered her into his arms, lifting her slightly off the ground as he kissed her, both of them laughing and crying at once. When he set her down, Natalie looked at the ring gleaming on her finger, then back at the man she had come to love. "From losing everything to gaining more than I ever dreamed," she marveled. "Life takes unexpected turns." "The best journeys usually do," he replied, drawing her close again as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. They agreed to a short engagement, with the wedding planned for early December before the worst of winter weather set in. The announcement was met with delight by Mrs. Flores, who immediately began planning an elaborate feast, and with knowing smiles from the ranch hands, who had apparently been wagering on when the boss would propose since July. Word spread quickly beyond the ranch. The following Saturday, when they rode into Glenrio together, they were greeted with congratulations from most of the townsfolk. Even Emmer Wright came out of the bakery to wish them well, though Harrison from the bank merely offered a tight-lipped nod when they passed him on the street. "Do you mind that your wedding will be here rather than in town?" Zachary asked as they drove back to the ranch that afternoon. "We could arrange it at the church in Glenrio if you'd prefer." Natalie shook her head, certain of her choice. "The ranch is our home. It's where our life together began, and it's where I want to start our marriage." Plans for the bakery conversion began immediately. Zachary hired carpenters from town to renovate the old storehouse, following Natalie's careful specifications for counter space, shelving, and most importantly, a large brick oven similar to the one from her original bakery. The work progressed steadily through November, with Natalie spending hours each day overseeing details while continuing her baking in the main house. As their wedding day approached, an unexpected letter arrived from Denver Mrs. Wright's brother owned a confectionery shop there and was selling his equipment as he expanded to larger premises. Among the items was a professional dough mixer, a rarity in the territory and something Natalie had longed for since seeing one at a trade exhibition years earlier. "It's expensive," she told Zachary that evening, showing him the letter, "but it would make such a difference for larger orders." He studied the details, then smiled at her excitement. "Consider it a wedding present. Write to them tomorrow and say we'll take it. Are you sure?" "It's a significant investment in our future," he replied simply. "Besides, a Palmer pays for quality." The mixer arrived by freight wagon just days before the wedding, causing as much stir among the ranch hands as any new stallion or piece of farming equipment might have. Natalie spent hours admiring it in the nearly completed bakery, already planning the expanded production it would enable. December 7, 1882, dawned clear and cold, perfect weather for a wedding. The ranch house had been transformed under Mrs. Flores's direction, with evergreen boughs and red ribbons decorating the main rooms, and candles ready to be lit for the afternoon ceremony. The bunkhouse cook had taken over kitchen duties for the day, insisting that both Mrs. Flores and Natalie be free to prepare for the celebration. In her room, Natalie stood before the mirror as Martha Donovan, who had become a good friend, helped arrange her hair. Her wedding dress was simple but elegant ivory satin with lace trim, ordered from a dressmaker in Santa Fe. Around her neck hung her mother's cameo pendant, her something old to complement the new dress, borrowed hairpins from Martha, and blue sapphires in her engagement ring. "You look beautiful," Martha declared, stepping back to admire the effect. "Zachary won't know what hit him." A knock at the door revealed Mrs. Flores, her usually practical appearance transformed by a festive dark blue dress, her silver hair arranged elegantly. "The minister has arrived," she announced, "and the guests are seated. Are you ready, Nina?" Natalie took a deep breath, her heart racing with anticipation rather than nervousness. "Yes, I'm ready." The ceremony took place in the ranch house parlor, where chairs had been arranged to create an aisle leading to the fireplace. Lewis, serving as best man, stood beside Zachary, who looked more handsome than ever in a new black suit, his dark hair neatly combed, his face clean-shaven for the occasion. As Natalie walked toward him on the arm of Mr. Donovan, who had offered to give her away, she felt a profound sense of rightness. The path that had begun with loss had led her to greater joy than she could have imagined. Zachary's eyes never left hers as she approached, his expression a mixture of awe and adoration that made her heart swell. The minister, a circuit preacher who served several small communities in the territory, led them through traditional vows, which they repeated with clear voices despite the emotion evident in both their faces. When Zachary slid the simple gold wedding band onto her finger to join her engagement ring, his hands steady and sure, Natalie felt the last pieces of her heart fall into place. "By the authority vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "You may kiss your bride." Zachary cradled her face gently between his hands as he leaned down to seal their union with a tender kiss, momentarily oblivious to the applause and cheers from their assembled guests. The celebration that followed was joyous and abundant, with music provided by several ranch hands who played fiddle and guitar, dancing that continued well into the evening, and food that showcased both Mrs. Flores's Mexican specialties and Natalie's finest baked creations. Even Mr. Harrison from the bank, who had been invited in a gesture of community goodwill, seemed to enjoy himself, particularly after several glasses of punch that Lewis had discreetly fortified. As night fell and guests began to depart, Zachary and Natalie stood on the porch, accepting final congratulations and watching lantern-lit wagons disappear down the ranch road toward town. "Happy, Mrs. Palmer?" Zachary asked quietly, his arm around her waist. Her new name brought a fresh wave of joy. "Completely," she replied, leaning against his solid warmth, "though it feels somewhat like a dream." "If it is, I hope we never wake up," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. Their wedding night was a tender discovery of each other, with passion tempered by reverence and nervousness overcome by trust. In the sanctuary of the master bedroom, now their shared room, Zachary proved as considerate a lover as he was a partner, guiding Natalie through unfamiliar territory with patience and care until they found their rhythm together, creating a new intimacy that bound them even more closely. Afterward, lying in his arms as moonlight filtered through the curtains, Natalie marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. If someone had told me on the day I lost my bakery that I would end the year as your wife, with a new bakery under construction and a future brighter than I could imagine, I would have thought them mad. Zachary's hand traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. And if someone had told me that the debt collector taking your bakery would lead to my finding the love of my life, I might have thanked him instead of wanting to punch him in the nose. She laughed softly. Perhaps we should send him a thank you note. Or a bill for the mixer, Zachary suggested with a chuckle. After all, his actions led directly to that expense. They fell asleep still smiling, wrapped in each other's arms and in the promise of their shared future. Spring 1883 brought the opening of Beaumont Palmer Bakery, situated perfectly at the junction of the Ranch Road and the main route to Glenrio. The timing coincided with increased traffic as cattle drives resumed and travelers ventured forth after winter's relative isolation. Natalie's reputation, combined with the convenient location, ensured a steady stream of customers from the first day. The professional mixer proved its worth immediately, allowing Natalie to fulfill larger orders than ever before. She hired 2 assistants from town young women eager to learn the baking trade and expanded her offerings to include elaborate cakes for special occasions, pies in every variety imaginable, and bread styles from simple sandwich loaves to artisanal creations influenced by her Mexican heritage. Zachary, true to his word from their very first conversation, treated the bakery as Natalie's domain. He helped with heavy lifting and occasional deliveries, but never interfered with her business decisions. Their partnership, both personal and professional, flourished on a foundation of mutual respect and shared goals. By summer, Natalie's success allowed her to propose a new venture, a small cafe attached to the bakery where travelers could rest and enjoy fresh food. Zachary enthusiastically supported the idea, hiring additional workers to expand the building while Natalie planned menus and acquired necessary equipment. "You're building quite the empire," he teased one evening as they reviewed architectural drawings spread across the dining table. "Soon you'll be as famous for your food as the Double P is for its cattle." "We're building it together," she corrected, leaning against his shoulder. "Your support made it all possible." "Your talent makes it successful," he countered, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I just provided the space." Their happiness seemed complete, yet Natalie sensed that Zachary sometimes watched her with a question in his eyes, particularly when they visited friends whose children played around their feet. She knew he wondered but was too considerate to ask directly, respecting her focus on establishing her business. In late July, as their first wedding anniversary approached, Natalie finally visited Doc Wilson in Glenrio, suspicions confirmed by the symptoms she'd been experiencing for several weeks. She kept the news to herself, planning a special way to tell Zachary. The opportunity came during a rare day off when they rode together to a hilltop overlooking the ranch. It was a favorite spot of theirs, offering views across the entire Double P property and beyond to distant mountains. They spread a blanket beneath a solitary oak tree, enjoying a picnic lunch that Natalie had prepared. As they lingered over coffee, Zachary pointed out recent improvements visible from their vantage point: new fencing in the north pasture, expanded corrals near the barn, the gleaming white bakery building at the roadside junction. "It's growing well," he said with satisfaction. "Everything we've built together." "And still growing," Natalie replied, her heart racing as she reached for his hand, "in more ways than one." He looked at her questioningly, and she guided his palm to rest against her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby, Zach, next spring." His expression transformed from confusion to wonder in an instant. A baby, you're sure? Doc Wilson confirmed it yesterday. She nodded, tears of joy threatening as she watched emotions play across his face. You're going to be a father. With a whoop that startled nearby birds into flight, Zachary gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. A baby, he repeated, voice thick with emotion. Our child. Oh, Natalie, I've hoped but didn't want to pressure you when the bakery was just getting established. The timing feels right, she assured him, cradling his face between her hands. The business is doing well, we have help now, and our home is ready for a family. He kissed her then, pouring all his joy and love into the embrace. When they parted, his eyes shone with unshed tears. Thank you, he whispered, for everything you've brought into my life, my partner, my love, and now the mother of my child. The months that followed were busy ones, with preparations for the baby alongside the daily operations of ranch and bakery. Zachary insisted on hiring additional help for both the bakery and house, ensuring Natalie wouldn't overextend herself as her pregnancy progressed. Mrs. Flores fussed over her like a mother hen, preparing special foods and sharing Mexican folk wisdom about childbearing that had been passed down through generations. By December, as they celebrated their first wedding anniversary, Natalie's rounded belly was obvious even beneath winter clothing. The cafe addition to the bakery was completed and thriving, managed primarily by her capable assistants with Natalie overseeing operations, but doing less of the physical work as her due date approached. Next year at this time, we'll be celebrating with our little one, Zachary marveled as they shared a private anniversary dinner in their home, the table set with their best china and candles casting a warm glow across the room. Boy or girl, what do you hope for? Natalie asked, curious though she suspected the answer. Health, he replied immediately. Beyond that, I have no preference. A daughter with your spirit would be a blessing, as would a son with your determination. And your kindness, she added, reaching across the table to take his hand. Your integrity. On a crisp March morning in 1884, after a labor that lasted through the night, Natalie gave birth to a son, Thomas Zachary Palmer, named for both their fathers. He arrived with a lusty cry that Mrs. Flores declared was a sign of a strong spirit, his tiny features a perfect blend of his parents. Zachary, who had paced the hallway throughout her labor, was finally allowed into the bedroom to meet his son. The sight of his big, capable hands cradling the tiny infant with infinite gentleness brought tears to Natalie's eyes. He's perfect, Zachary whispered, voice awed as he sat carefully beside her on the bed. You're both perfect. In that moment, holding her husband and newborn son, Natalie felt the journey come full circle. From the devastation of losing her bakery to the fullness of the life she now possessed, it seemed almost like a dream, yet it was wonderfully, tangibly real. As if reading her thoughts, Zachary leaned down to kiss her forehead. From loss to this abundance, he murmured, life has a way of surprising us. The best journeys usually do, she replied, echoing his words from the day he'd proposed, and ours is just beginning. In the years that followed, the Double P Ranch and Beaumont Palmer Bakery and Cafe became landmarks in the territory. Their success allowed Zachary and Natalie to expand both businesses, creating opportunities for others while building security for their growing family. Thomas was joined by a sister, Elena Grace, 2 years later, and eventually by another brother, William Lewis. The day the debt collector took Natalie's bakery had seemed like an ending. Instead, it had been the beginning of a journey she could never have imagined, one that led not just to a new kitchen where she could bake, but to a love that transformed her life and a family that filled her heart beyond measure. Sometimes, she reflected, the most devastating losses can lead to the greatest blessings, if one has the courage to follow the unexpected path that opens before them.